Hi friends, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about mistakes as a parent, and there are so many of them. Where do I even start? But specifically, I've been thinking about lately how unfortunately our oldest gets to be kind of and I don't love this analogy, but it is kind of true that they're kind of like our practice child where we figure things out and then we learn how to do it better in the future. And so if you don't know me, I have two baby boys. My oldest is almost 3 and my younger one is 10 months old, almost a year old. So I am getting ready to plan kind of their joint birthday party. They are 3 weeks apart in terms of the date on the calendar. My oldest is October 17th, my youngest is November 6th, and so I am planning a little joint birthday party for them for their 3rd and 1st birthday. But I've been thinking kind of lately about, parenting mistakes, just things that you don't know the first time going into it, how you're going to necessarily deal with a lot of different things. And in retrospect, with a little self-evaluation, you can figure these things out. For baby number 2, and I'm sure as we have more babies in the future, there will be even more lessons and wisdoms that come out of seeing our kids grow, especially because we are just right now parenting babies and toddlers. And so I'm sure as we get into different phases of parenting, we will have so many different lessons to learn as well. I came up with 5 things specifically for the first 3 years of life that I did with my as a first-time mom that I wish that I would have done a little bit differently. And maybe this can help any other first-time moms, maybe even second-time or multiple-time moms like myself, kind of reflect back on some of these things and think, me too. Me too. So let's look into some of these together. Okay, so with parenting, there's obviously going to be a lot of different approaches to so many different things. Truly, it feels like every single individual parents differently because there are a plethora of choices you can make, from just birth choices to the first year of life, how you're going to feed, if you're going to sleep train, if you're going to co-sleep, and how you're going to potty train and when you're going to potty train. And there are so many choices to make as a parent. It can be very overwhelming at times. And so this is just my own personal experience, just as a little disclaimer before we get into this. This is just my personal experience on things that I think were a mistake, quote unquote, a mistake, just because I feel like I did it better or differently the second time, and I wish I would have done that the first time. But I do understand that if I wouldn't have done it the way that I did it the first time, I wouldn't have realized and learned from it. I think that there is definitely room and need to be a first-time mom and to figure it out on the fly. So the first thing is sleep training too early. With Henry, I started sleep training him at about 4 to 5 months old. With Lucas, we waited a little bit longer until he was about 6 to 8 months old approximately. It was very gradual with him, and that's for a few reasons. One of the reasons was because for Henry, he actually caught RSV when he was 4 months old, and that really threw his sleep rhythms off entirely. He was in a pretty good established routine, but then when he got RSV, his sleep routine was almost completely flipped upside down, to the fact where he was spending most of his time awake at night and he was sleeping for the most part during the day. So it was truly completely turned upside down. And so we were trying to get on a rhythm again, trying to figure that out after he recovered from RSV. And so that's kind of what propelled us to this kind of earlier sleep train. Is we're like, okay, whatever we're doing is not working. His routine is completely upside down. We need to do something to improve this. And so that's kind of why we started at that pace with him. With Lucas, he just wasn't quite ready at 4 or 5 months. And I was thinking, you know, this is really early to be sleep training. And so there's just so many different theories out there, you know, with sleep training, how to do it, cry it out method versus not. We kind of unofficially did what's called the Ferber method. And we were actually doing the Ferber method without actually knowing that it had a name or was an official method, but that is essentially what we were doing. I saw that on another post at one point that we, without knowing it, we're pretty much doing the Ferber method for sleep training, and it worked phenomenally with both boys. We just did it at different times for both boys. And so with Lucas, it just felt a little too soon to start that with him. So he was sleeping really, he didn't have the same story with RSV. He was sleeping really, really well. And so we gave him a little extra soothing for a little longer than what we did for Henry. I wish for Henry that we would have waited a little bit longer. I do understand that we were in that situation trying to like recover from having RSV, but just in hindsight, I think that the timing with Lucas was so much more organic. We kind of read his signs more, listened to the signs more about when he was kind of ready to be a little bit more independent, to soothe himself to sleep. And we really responded to that a little better than we did with Henry. With Henry, we just didn't know what signs they were going to be, so we were kind of just forcing it at a certain time. There is also kind of this thing that babies aren't capable of self-soothing before 4 months, or there's this thing out there where I have read that and been exposed to that fact. I'll need to fact check that, whether or not that's accurate, but we kind of, you know, hit that 4-month mark, thought, okay, babies kind of are able to self-soothe at this point, so let's just go ahead and do it. So I just wish that we would have, you know, gave Henry a little bit more soothing and comfort and time and attention. And I mean, of course, like we loved him. We were trying our best to do that. But I think that we were just way better suited to reading Lucas's needs in terms of the timing of sleep training. And I wish we would have waited a little bit longer with Henry. In the future, I think we'll do exactly what we did with Lucas, because it just felt so appropriate to his development at that time. But obviously it goes to reading the individual child when they're ready, what their cues are. So it is very, very intuitive and adaptable, I think. Okay, number 2 actually has a little bit more to do with kind of labor timing and having a baby. And that is the mistake that I made, was to believe other people's testimonies or averages instead of my own mom gut. And so what I mean by that is, especially for delivery timing, I was pursuing a home birth and a fully natural birth with Henry, and I did for both. But as a first-time mom, I decided, you know, I'm going to go the home birth route, and that's how I was born. I've been really exposed to that. My sister has had home births. I myself was a home birth from my mom. My mom had 5 home births, and so I decided, you know, I wanted to pursue that route, wanted to go natural, all of that. And I just knew because of that, because I wasn't exploring induction until it was a very, very like 42-week, very last minute needed situation, that I was going to let my body go into labor naturally until it was absolutely imperative to induce. And so because I knew I was doing that, I just trusted a lot of, you know, averages and testimony that I saw out there, that, you know, a lot of first-time moms will go over that, you know, once my due, that I would go over my due date, that once I was given the advice, once my due date comes, to literally go out to dinner and celebrate it, and then to wish it goodbye as if nothing ever happened. Like, don't basically give it much time, because it's just a date, and you know, I would likely pass it. And so I just started to believe that. I started to believe those testimonies that, okay, I'm probably gonna pass this thing. It's not very common to go into labor before your due date, etc. But something in my gut was telling me that I was going to go into labor earlier. And I know that a lot of first-time moms think that, a lot of people think that, but I'm just like, deeply, I just feel like I am not going to go very far past my due date. And so my due date was October 19th. And my guess was that my baby would arrive on October 20th, was my guess, is that, he would be right near my due date. He would be really close to being on time. I may even go a little bit earlier. I'm not going to go very far past it, is what I felt. But then I just let myself, as the date got closer and closer, to think, everyone's saying I'm going to go over, so let me just, prepare to go over, essentially. And so I mentally prepared for what other people were telling me rather than mentally preparing for what my own intuition was telling me, which is that I would go earlier. And I did. It wasn't significantly earlier, but I ended up giving birth naturally on October 17th, and I started going into labor naturally on October 15th. It was a very, very long labor process, but yeah, the labor process started on October 15th. I ended up giving birth at 5 a.m. on October 17th. So 2 days before my due date for my first baby. So it's just something where I just really trusted that. And the second time around, I trusted that because, again, people were saying, it happened the first time, but it may not happen again. I bet you'll go over your due date. And I was like, I just don't think I will. Like, I really don't think that I'm going to make it to my 40th week appointment. And so my midwife's office was like trying to schedule my 40th week appointment with me. And I was just like, I don't think it's going to be necessary. I really don't think I'm going to make it to my 40th week appointment. And my 40th week appointment, I think, was like 2 days after my due date. My due date with my second was November 9th. And I felt like I was, not going to make it to November 9th. And I did not. I made it to November 6th. But I was mentally prepared the second time around because I learned from the first time around to just trust my gut. And I was so prepared to go into labor. My house was tidy and clean. The meals were prepped and frozen. I just felt so mentally prepared. I took work off. Like, I was off work for like 2-3 days before going into labor because I decided not to work up until labor that time around. So yeah, I just really trusted my instinct and not like averages or what other people were saying happened to them. Okay, mistake number 3 is being a little bit too worried for socialization with my first, and wanting to kind of force opportunities for him to socialize, kind of like when you're trying to socialize a puppy and you're like, okay, you need to get used to other dogs. Let's socialize you so you can get used to like other kinds of people and how different people look and how different dogs look. Kind of thinking the same way with a child of like, okay, I need to, get you out in the world and get you next to other babies your age, all the things, because I was working from home, and I still do work from home with Henry. And well, actually, when I first had Henry, I was working a few days a week up in Reno, but he was never in daycare officially. My mom provided childcare when I was working up in Reno, and she still does provide childcare, even me working at home. And so he plays with his cousin, his older cousin, but otherwise doesn't get a lot of socialization, or wasn't getting a lot of socialization as a baby, other than family members. And so I was a little bit stressed about that. I was thinking, we need to get him out into the world. He needs to play with other kids his age, etc. Even, as an infant, I was thinking this. But there is a thing that I learned about recently, and it is called parallel play, that a lot of babies, what I just read right now is 18, it can be 18 months to like 4 years old that this happens, but will need to be fact checked on that. But a lot of babies and toddlers will play next to their peers, but not necessarily with their peers. And I was a little bit nervous watching Henry because there would be a few like play dates we would have with friends with similar age babies, and they would kind of play around each other, but Henry like wouldn't play with other kids as a baby or infant and toddler. And I was nervous about that I'm like, we need to really go out of our way to make sure that he's able to play with kids. But that I am not stressed about that whatsoever with Lucas, just because of this thing called parallel play, that it is normal for babies, for infants, for toddlers to kind of acknowledge other babies and small kids in the room, but not necessarily, their full imaginations are not activated yet. Their skills of socialization aren't necessarily activated yet when they're 2 years old. And so it is totally normal for them to kind of play around other kids. Well, I am just not as concerned about it, honestly, that, he has his opportunities to play with other kids, and that's good and fine, and he will learn those skills as he grows, but it's not something I am actively trying to force or am anxious about. Mistake number 4 was actually something that I did not realize until I had my second, which is that the various milestones that a baby will hit in their first year often has to do with the baby's individual personality and temperament, as opposed to being like behind or slow developmentally, anything to do with essentially their health versus perhaps their personality. And what I mean by that is that we have done nothing different between Henry and Lucas in their first year of life in terms of, cognitively to help them grow, play-wise to help them crawl and then walk. We have taken pretty much the same approach to both boys, and they have just learned and developed at completely different paces. And I can see now that so much of it is just their temperaments. Their temperaments are way different. My oldest is very, very active. I think he has like the quintessential second child syndrome that people kind of talk about, which is their second is just like off their rocker and crazy and bold and like will run and take big risks and, be super, super active and fearless and all things. That is my first. That's Henry. He is so fearless. He just jumps in head first. He is very, very bold. He's very hands-on, super physical. And my second is just not like that. He is very cognitive. He is very keen on observing people talk, observing conversation, watching things before he does them. He's very chatty. He loves mimicking. He loves babbling a lot. He's very talkative, but he's also very just precise, and he gets really down to like the nitty-gritty of like, I'm going to touch this very individual small thing now. And of course, they all kind of do these certain milestones at different times, but I didn't realize how much of it was just temperament. And so anything where you either feel proud of yourself, maybe that your baby hit a milestone early, or you feel discouraged that your baby hit a milestone on the later side, I realize now that it's really nothing that I have done or not done. It is truly just the baby. The baby will learn and grow in their own time and speed, and it has nothing to do with what I am doing or not doing as a mom, and it has everything to do, or a huge portion to do, with just their personality and their temperament. So that was a huge, huge thing that I learned with baby number 2. The last one is one that I have recently realized has been a huge mistake that I did with my first, and a disservice to him and to us, and that is something you may not expect. It's actually avoiding running errands with my kids. And what I mean by that is that if I had to run an errand, if I had to, go to the bank, if I had to go grab some groceries or make a return or any kind of errand specifically that involved getting out of the car, I would wait until my husband got back from work or until my mom came over and provided childcare, and then I would go out and I would do that errand solo. And I would do that because it would be very overwhelming, because like I said, my first is extremely rambunctious. He is very, very active. I would just get overwhelmed. And with 2 kids, that became even worse, because I'm like, how am I supposed to juggle? Specifically, how am I supposed to have a baby, like wear a baby attached to me, and then have Henry like ping pong all over the place? Like, how am I supposed to reel it in and teach like etiquette in public to my oldest while I am hand holding my youngest? And how am I supposed to balance all that? And I just realized that I have made it so much more difficult by avoiding it, essentially. That by going out actively and doing the hard thing, I mean, this sounds like pretty intuitive, that it's like, yes, of course, like if you practice it, it'll get better, but it's way easier to see in hindsight than it is in the moment. Because in the moment, you just think also that like running an errand will be some mama time, like, okay, I can go out and get a little coffee, do my return, go to the bank, come home, whatever. Or I can go out, I mean, who really goes to the bank anymore? I don't know why I keep throwing that out there, but as, you know what I mean, just like popping in a physical location, an errand, or anything like that, it became overwhelming for me to take my kids to do that. But now I am legitimately doing errand training with my boys, where I think, what is one small doable errand that I can run today that is not going to be too crazy overwhelming, that I can practice having both boys with me so that I can get them used to it and get me used to it, and let's just go out and do that thing on purpose. And so I actually went in and thought, I'm gonna go, this was a few weeks ago, like I'm gonna go with Henry to Target. I'm going to practice with him holding my hand the entire time in and out of the store. We're gonna pick out one single toy and then we're gonna walk out, check it out, and then he's gonna play with it at home. Like that is gonna be our errand. We're just gonna practice holding mom's hand in and out of the store, not touching things when mama says don't touch things, and we're just gonna like practice. We're gonna do errand practice so that we can have some etiquette out in public. And he did phenomenal. He did so good. And so I just realized, you know, it's such a disservice to him, to me, to be avoiding those things, that the only way I'm going to become more confident and he is going to become more used to like etiquette in public is just to practice it in baby steps. So I wish I would have done that a lot earlier with Henry, but you know, it's not too late. He's only 3 years old. We can absolutely keep practicing it now. Okay, so those were the mistakes that I feel like I made with Henry so far, or with my first so far, that I have only really realized after having my second. And like I said, parenting is just a learning process. It is such a humbling process. I do not feel like I have it figured out by any means. I honestly feel pretty lost with it sometimes, especially having such a strong-willed 3-year-old. I am just so tested in all the ways, trying to figure out what works best for us, what parenting style works best for us. What are we gonna do in terms of consequences? How are we going to discipline? Like, what is our style? How can my husband and I be on the same page about like boundaries we set? All these things, I'm honestly just really diving into that now and trying to determine and figure out our parenting style, because it's much different when you have an infant and you're just keeping them alive versus when you have a very capable toddler who now can converse with you and understand what you're saying. That it opens up this whole new world of parenting. So I'm excited and humbled to get into it more with him and to learn all the new lessons moving forward, and just kind of figuring out what kind of parent I want to be. And yeah, unfortunately, Henry's gonna have to be the child that I do learn all of those milestones on, but I do love that my boys are so different that I get to figure, you know, things out that will work for Lucas when Lucas hits those milestones as well, because he's just a totally different kid. So really excited to see them both grow up and to be the kind of mom that they both need me to be. So that is it. That is the video. Thank you so much for watching it today. It means so much to me that you did. Please feel free to follow along for other content like this on parenting and all the things. I cannot wait to catch you on the next video. Bye, friends.